So a little bit about teaching. There are lots of people out there that are immensely talented fighters and practitioners of arts. But the number of those that teach that really don't have the skills to be teaching is phenomenal. And this is especially so in the traditional kind of Asian martial arts where your belt might dictate that you teach, but the tools you're given to teach are archaic, strange, not led by proper teaching science. They're just off. There's something that some Soke Gary made in Swindon in 1992. So it's very important that if you are an instructor to invest time in being a better teacher, and that really matters. Now, I used to be a school teacher, and one of the things I pride myself on is being able to plan and construct a lesson. I think that's a very important skill to have. You need planning and preparation, and you need communication and class control. And all of these things are very, very important if you're to have people that enjoy and get something useful out of your stuff. And there's many people that do this very, very naturally. It's not like you need a degree in stuff to be a good teacher, but it always helps if you can bring on more tools to assist you in that journey. And so I want to share a couple of little tools which I think are important, and hopefully they might help you up your game a little bit as a communicator, as an educator, as a teacher. So one of the first things you might want to look at is how people learn. And this is a very, very simple concept. It's an old school model, but I prefer this model to some of the new ones. The VAC model, which is essentially visual learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners. People that learn by looking, people that learn by listening, and people that learn by just doing it. And most people fall into the visual learner, then the auditory, and then a relatively small percentage in terms of normal human groups fall into the kinesthetic. But you'll find that in martial art clubs, tends to be a bigger population of kinesthetic learners. At least I've found that anyway. So if you look at VAC and the VAC model, most people typically fall into one pot, or they are best served and they are best taught when you do so via that medium. When you do something visual, or you do something auditory, or you do something kinesthetic for them, the content sticks. So one of the important things that you can do is make sure that you're not just mushing all of those things into one. If you're giving a demonstration and you're engaging the visual learners, you might want to try doing a couple of reps where you just keep your gob shut, where you make your movements very overt and you take the time to slow those movements down so people can visually take in the nuance. If you're yapping away and telling jokes or being informative or moving your gob in any way, their attention might be on your eyes and not what your body's doing. So you find this especially, a lot of Japanese instructors don't tend to waffle. They will show you and they demand your attention when I am doing a thing. I don't need to talk to you. Look at me, fool. So again, for a visual learner, you might try and do a couple of reps, a couple of sets in your demonstrations in silence. Set the scene. This is what I'm going to do. Please watch very, very carefully and move slowly and deliberately, and then increase the pace, but the visual learner can take it all in. With the auditory learner, what you might want to do is do a portion of the technique, pause, step out of that scene, and then explain clearly and congruently what's been happening. So you might do a small portion of the technique, pause, step out of scene, and explain. And that will be very, very useful for an auditory learner. Another thing, a great thing that would be useful for auditory learners is having people close their eyes and you describe the scene. This can work for visual learners too, because you are getting them to visualize. But if you want it to engage a visual learner, please tell them to visualize. If you want to engage an auditory learner, please tell them to listen. Okay? So you can pause at certain points and you can explain to people, and explain the sounds. You're in a bar. It's really noisy. You can hear the cash machine. There's a Larry stag do over there. You can hear something else. What are your senses picking up from the environment? Describe all of that in auditory form. You might put on sounds from a pub, from a club, from whatever, and use that as you're speaking. So that people are building an auditory picture. But at the very least, as you're describing, you might want to take yourself out of the physical scene and use your verbals to do that. And for your kinesthetic learners, You might decide to have everyone do in pairs the demonstration with you so that they are using their hands and they're doing the thing as you're showing it, so they can physically manipulate time and space and content. They can get hands-on with the material. So it's very important. A lot of instructors, especially as we get a bit more seasoned, we think that we're really good at doing all of them. I will describe and I will show and you can get hands-on. But the problem is, if you dabble everywhere, you serve no particular type of learner very well. So it's good to know what type of learners your students are, and you can discuss that with them. But it's also very good to alter your methods of learning. I will show one rep in silence. I will describe one rep. You will do one rep with me, and every learner should have been catered for within that VAC model, so people understand that content more keenly, more deeply, more appropriately, and the retention is better. It's very, very important. Learning outcomes. So have in your mind when you're teaching a class what learning outcomes you are setting out. Typically aim for no more than 3. So if you are saying, this is my class, and in that class you might do a bit of psychology, a bit of scenario, a couple of strikes, a couple of grapples, a bit of weapon, whatever. The mix of the class is completely down to you and your system and your students. But you might decide, if students are taking away 3 things from my class, the 3 vital things, try and know in advance what those are, and try and set out at the start of the class, this is what I want you to take away from today. And as you summarize the class, this is what I want you to take away from the day. People's ability to retain content is pretty damn poor. It's a lot poorer than you would imagine. And especially you've got to imagine that most people probably aren't as invested as you are if they're just a student, if they're just coming. This might be the thing they do on a Thursday. It's not their daily life. It's not the thing that's always on their mind. So again, set your learning outcomes. Try and write them down in a reasonable lesson plan. A written lesson plan is always very, very useful, even if it's just scribbled down. But learning outcomes, what are they? And try and keep them as few as possible, because retention is important. On retention, there's an effect called the primacy and the recency effect. And what it means, in basic speak, is people tend to remember the first stuff they did and the last stuff they did. So if you've set your learning outcomes, make sure that the core impressive stuff that you've got lands early doors or at the end, because that's what the student's going to go away and remember. Don't bury your most useful material in the middle of your lesson when there'll be apathy, attrition, distraction, lots of content buzzing around their minds. Put your good stuff early or last. If you're going to land something psychological and important and deep, do that before you do your warm-up, before you start doing your star jumps and you run in a circle and touch your toes. If you're going to give a lesson, give a lesson. At the end, if you're going to summarize, take the time to be very congruent with what you're talking about. These are the things I want you to go home and think about today. It's very important. Take the time to understand the gravity of your own voice. Slow down, make points, be clear. These are all really important things, and many people will do it naturally, but take the time to think, am I speaking too fast to this audience? Especially for the primacy and the recency effect. Have I got the good stuff early doors, at the end, and has it sunk in? Have I got this through their skull? That's a very important thing to think about. So don't waste or get all willy-nilly with your first 10 minutes and your last 10 minutes. These are your golden windows to actually land something useful with a student. So make sure you exploit them well. Look at teaching models. So the didactic model is I teach and you listen. I stand, you listen. You are sat around. I am the college lecturer. You are the students. And there's some merit to didactic teaching. A lot of Asian martial arts are didactic led. I teach, you listen, you obey. But if you're going to teach didactically, if you're going to deliver, then bloody well deliver. Because it's on you. You are the showman then. You are the man delivering the TED Talk. You are the alpha. So if you're doing that, if you're delivering something didactically, you got to know how to own the space, own the tone, and own the pace. You need to be able to run it to a pace that people care about and people listen to. You need to be able to land your words very, very well, because it's all on you. All of the pressure is on you. And that's where things like the VAC model are really important, that if you are going to be that didactic style teacher, at least give stuff to people in a variety of methods that they can consume and learn from. Another method, and a method I'm really fond of and I enjoy using, is the Socratic Method. Now, the Socratic Method is essentially a tarty way to say, you figure it out, and I will shape and guide and prompt and provoke. So the Socratic Method is essentially, you would set a scenario or a hypothesis, and you have the students themselves figure it out under your gentle nurturing nudges. So for example, you might have a scenario where someone's grabbed someone's shirt and they got their hand like this. And you'd be like, he's grabbed your shirt. Why has he grabbed your shirt? Because he wants to punch me. Why does he want to punch you? Because I offended him. Why have you offended him? Because I told him to fuck off. Why did you tell him to fuck off? Because he said I spilled his pint, but I didn't. It wasn't me. I didn't do it. And he just got all aggressive. Why did he get all aggressive if you didn't spill his pint? Because he's mentally fragile and his mates are here and he's a bit drunk. Stop. So now you've got a root cause of a problem. You've used the Socratic Method. You've used what's known as the 5 whys. You keep asking why. You keep investigating. You keep digging. If you put why to a problem 5 times, you'll get to the root cause. So instead of saying, well, if he grabs me and goes to punch, I do this and I duck my head and I do this, you might start to land at the actual useful stuff of, how do I deal with someone that's drunk in an ego-filled situation? How do I diffuse? How do I calm down so I don't end up in this situation? So the Socratic Method is really good because you can deconstruct and deconstruct. If he did this and you did that, why did you do that? And why did he do this? Keep asking why and keep having the students put forward or posit their ideas and listen to those ideas and nurture them and say, right, that's what John thinks. What do you think, Mary? Do you think John's right? Yeah. Do you think John's assumption was correct? If you can get the group to start to police and guide themselves, eventually, because humans are clever monkeys, they'll come up with the right solution and they'll feel that much prouder for it, and it will last in their brains much longer because they feel like they've found the solution under your coaching guidance. So encouraging students to ask why, and again and again and again, and challenging and provoking and always questioning the Socratic Method can be very, very successful. And it's very, very important that you do that and you look at all these different models out there. But if you're a teacher, if you're an instructor, or if you instruct even infrequently at things like seminars, try and put a bit of time aside outside of your normal punching, kicking, fighting, admin, and think, how could I be a little bit better of a teacher? Could I work on my learning outcomes? Could I work on my teaching methodologies? Could I investigate with my students, get some honest feedback about my teaching? Could I understand more about the learning styles of the people I teach? What's a better way to do it? Am I better putting things in context, in a story? Do my students like things relatively mechanical? Do they like to look at the moves first and then hear the context? Engage with your audience, because if you know your audience, you can teach to that audience. But I would say, if you've got respect for yourself as a martial arts instructor, invest as much time as possible in the skill of instructing outside of the martialness. There is so much you can learn about being a good teacher just by your own research and your own experimentation. Never be afraid to mess up and experiment and try and beta test the ways in which you teach. Get good feedback and engage with other instructors so that you can land on a teaching style which gives the best bang for buck, the best return on investment for the students that part with their hard-earned cash to learn from you. So do take the time to invest in being a better teacher, and everybody will benefit, especially you, the instructor. Enjoy.